Yo, what's going on, guys? So, before we get to the episode, I want to first let you guys know that the audio when I speak is not the best. For some reason, my mic was not put on the proper settings, and this is an issue that I've been having before in other podcasts. But now, moving forward, I will make sure to have this fixed. For some reason, my mic automatically just adjusts its volume sometimes, so I will always check now before I press the record button. Another thing that I want to point out is that my video does lag. For some reason, my connection isn't the best when I'm shooting these episodes, and this hasn't really been happening too often. I think it has something to do with my browsers. So once again, I apologize for the bad quality. When it comes to my guest, Aleeza, her audio and her video is working perfectly fine, and I thought I should at least just upload the video, just to have it to document the conversation. And also, I apologize to Aleeza. Thank you so much for being on, and I apologize for these technical issues. I'm getting back into the game, so I appreciate your patience and you being on. Also, to you guys, my viewers, I appreciate your patience, and I will continue to learn and grow, and hopefully continue to produce better content. So, thank you for that, and I'll let you proceed with the video. Okay, welcome everybody to the Lucid Podcast. Today's guest is Aleeza Kaplan. So just a little bit about Lisa. I've known her for a good while now. We've been in mutual circles. We are both social dancers, and I think that's really something that we can connect with or connect on in this podcast. But also, Elisa is a mental health support coach. So I feel like both of our fields are very connected, very overlapping, lots of things that we can discuss. And I'm looking forward to this episode. Anything you want to say before we get to the first question, Elisa?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm happy to have you. So, um, so yeah, let's begin. So, what got you started in the mental health field, and then we can go from there.
I think I got started in the mental health field for the same reason as pretty much everyone else who's in the mental health field. We start off kind of curious about mental health to better understand ourselves. And once you start learning a few things and trying a few things and they start working, you're like, hey, there's something to this. And once you start like your own healing journey, you're like, whoa, like how can I get other people involved on this too? I'm learning so much about myself and how to grow and what worked for me and what doesn't work for me anymore. And personally, I just got to a point in my life where I hit like my version of rock bottom. Everybody's version of rock bottom is different, but I realized I needed some outside help, and I got some outside help, and it really transformed my life. And I decided that I wanted to be part of that outside help to really help get people out of a dark place and live a life that they're proud of and that impacts others as well.
Did you Do you want to go more into your story? Kind of, what was something that what was one of the biggest things that helped you get through that phase of your life?
I would say a combination of things. I would say changing the way I spoke to myself, like my inner monologue. I was very self-deprecating. I sort of somewhere along the way developed this idea that you're supposed to talk to yourself like, oh, you're so stupid, you're so dumb, like you're so ugly. I thought that was normal. So really changing my inner voice, learning how to advocate for myself, set healthy boundaries, and also becoming aware of my character defects and where I fall short and learn strategies to better handle those so that they don't interfere with my life and my relationships.
What were some signs that because you pointed out a few good ones, like the importance of your inner voice, how you conversate with yourself. I think one of the main things that came up to me were kind of exploring that more. So what are some signs that show that an individual should be looking into getting support with their mental health?
So there's a few things that are kind of big factors to me. One is relationships. Are you having trouble keeping relationships? Do you notice that like every year you have a new group of friends, or that you're constantly having like friend breakups, or people are constantly ghosting you, or maybe you're ghosting other people, right? Do you have long lasting relationships? And when something happens in those relationships, as naturally happens, maybe someone hurts your feelings or crosses a boundary that is either explicit or implicit, do you feel comfortable having that conversation, or are you going to avoid it? Is a big one. And I would also like to talk about flexibility. Like, how rigid are you? If you go and have something in mind and someone says, hey, what if we do this instead? If you have a really hard time transitioning from point A to point B, that could be, maybe some control issues, some anxiety. So I want people to be able to sort of switch gears more quickly, because I say flexibility is a big indicator of mental health.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. I'm thinking about, yeah, that point of flexibility is very salient to me. I think the ability to switch on and off and move between different scenarios while still retaining a consistent identity. I think that's also it kind of connects also with relationships. I think relationships within themselves are a really good testing ground of how capable you are of maintaining your identity and also engaging with other identities, other ideas. So I think um, there's like that overlap between flexibility and relationships. And I think that overlap really does have to do with identity, consistent identity. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh my gosh, so much. So this is like one of my most favorite topics. I love to talk a lot about like codependency,
Okay.
and people pleasing, which sometimes our identity can get lost in other people's needs and other people's identity. So those are topics that I'm very passionate about. There's this book that I like called The Courage to Be Disliked. And you can even just hear it in the title, right? Like, I am who I am, regardless of whether or not you like me. That's a strong sense of identity. Like, I like me, and if you don't like me, that's your loss. You know, I think for a lot of people, specifically for women who are socialized to be likable and pleasant, it's actually really countercultural to be okay with being disliked. And it means that you have a really strong sense of identity.
So let's get into that topic around women. I think about the trait of agreeableness, which is a personality trait in the big five. And I think that also falls very much in line with this people pleasing aspect. I think there is definitely a balance that needs to be achieved. I think there are moments to be a people, not so much a people pleaser, but kind of a people validator, capable of giving people the validation that they need. But I think something here is that to be able to do that, you first must give yourself that validation that you need, to be able to be that space for others. Um, so pertaining to women, and I guess your experience and your story, can you go deeper into that? Um, yeah, into that,
Sure.
that topic of balancing, right?
Excuse me. Let me think which direction I want to take this in, because I can take it in a few directions.
Yeah, it's what. Yeah.
And I will say that I work with a lot of male clients who are also struggling with codependency and things in their own way. I love working with male clients as well, but I fell in love with helping other women like me. Uh,
Mhm.
so I love working with women, and I think you know we're socialized from such a young age. I even saw this video recently, and it was these little girls and these little boys, And an adult, like their teacher, it was like a social experiment. This teacher had baked these cookies with like way too much salt on purpose. And she goes to the kids and she goes, "Guys, I worked so hard on baking these cookies for you. Oh, I hope you love them. It's going to make me so happy." And the cookies are obviously disgusting because they have all this salt in them. And so the boys try it and they go, "Ugh." And the girls try it and they go, "That's so good. Like, thank you so much." And when I saw that, I was like, wow, this starts earlier than I even realized. Like, these were elementary school kids. And, when you talked about like agreeableness, this is where I draw the line between people pleasing and just kindness. And there's one word: resentment. If you say yes to something and later resent the fact that you have to do that, you are not being agreeable, you are being a people pleaser. Because people pleaser sounds nice, right? Oh, you're pleasing people. That sounds great. But when we're pleasing people at the detriment of ourselves, that's when it becomes a problem, and I would separate it from agreeableness. I also think a lot of women think like, oh, like codependency looks a certain way, right? It must mean that I only spend time with like my significant other. And that's what codependency looks like. But codependency can look like so many other things. One, you can have a codependent relationship with a family member, with a boss, with a child, with a friend. Like codependent relationships aren't just for significant others. And it doesn't just mean, oh, I need to spend all my time with you. It could be, I have a hard time separating my emotions from yours. I feel the need to solve your problems, or I feel the need to manipulate you to get you to do what I want, right? This inability to separate someone completely from ourselves, that's codependency.
Okay. I think about what when you mentioned that, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Carl Jung's work around the shadow.
I've heard a
Um,
little bit about shadow work.
okay, awesome. So I think the main thing, I think the direct connection to me is what you mentioned around resentment. That word within itself is a big differentiator, and I think um one of the things that I learned very early on was this idea that the shadow is a big it's a sort of like a compilation of the things that you repress, um, and we like to stow these things away, and little by little, we end up stowing ourselves away, and so it becomes this phenomenon of you becoming disconnected from yourself, and so I think that will then naturally lead to become even more dependent on these other individuals, I believe.
Exactly. It's like a cycle.
Yeah. Um, I think so. You mentioned that you speak to men, so and you have your story also. What's something that's very apparent, like with other guys, something that they struggle with? How, or also kind of this is leading somewhere else also, like how does codependency manifest itself? Is there a difference between men and women, do you believe?
Ooh, I wonder if I still have my book that I could bring out. But okay, the first question was, what do I notice like different in men?
Yeah.
Um, I would say that I have to sort of take a different approach with men. I think a lot of women need to be validated first, right? They feel very alone in their experience. And first, you need to tell them the experience that you're having is completely a natural, normal response to the circumstances at play. And this is how you overcome it. When I tell a man, like, oh, like your feelings are so valid, they're like, I know my feelings are like, what are you saying? And so I realized that I had to totally change my approach when it came to men. I think when I'm talking to men, I have to realize that I might be the only person they talk to about this. When I'm talking to women, they've probably talked to their friend about it a little, maybe their partner a little, but many men don't have emotionally safe, vulnerable relationships, and they're sort of starved of that. And a lot of them seek emotional validation from women, either female friends, a mom, or a girlfriend, wife. But I would say that that's a big difference is they have less of a support network that they feel comfortable relying on. It's more taboo for them to talk about their feelings and they suffer more in private.
What do you think that? I mean, if you want to go grab the book, feel free to, because I think, I mean, you really
Okay, let me
you
go
feel
see if I
confident. Go
have
ahead.
it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Let me go see if I have it. Okay, I think I lent it to a friend who
Okay.
coincidentally decided to move and never talk to me again. So I don't think I will
Oh.
ever get that book back. Uh, but let me look something up. Maybe I can find it online. Okay, perfect. So there is an organization called CODA, which is Codependence Anonymous. It's similar to like, we have Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, things like that. And what you'll notice with people with addictive tendencies or patterns is when you take away the substances, the next thing that their addictions manifest on is people. And so they created a codependency anonymous uh, group essentially that has its own sort of 12 steps and its own sponsor system, which is really cool. So I'm on the CODA website right now. So there are different patterns. So there's denial patterns, low self-esteem patterns, compliance patterns, control patterns, avoidance patterns. So those are the patterns. So the denial patterns are more like what they sound like you're kind of in denial of what's going on with you. Like if you say, hey, like, how are you feeling? This person might not be able to tell you, I feel sad, I feel angry, or this other person feels sad or angry. It's like you're totally shut down and you're not really aware of of emotions and other people's. And I think that my guess is that it comes from when you can't even identify your own emotions, you have a hard time reading emotions in others, and it's hard to have healthy relationships that way. The other one is low self-esteem patterns. So difficulty making decisions, judge what they say, think, or do harshly is never good enough, embarrassed to receive recognition or praise, value others' approval of their thinking, feelings. So this is like, validate me, please. Like, I'm not good enough until you say I am. And then when you say I am, I'm not going to believe you. And that's what low self esteem patterns are. And then compliance patterns are this is when we get people stuck in abusive relationships. Like, they're loyal to a detriment. These are the people who are like, I'll give you the shirt off my back. And they say it kind of with a badge of pride. But what it is staying in harmful situations for too long and at a detriment to themselves. And then the last one that I think, or the second to last one, and this is one that I struggled with, is control patterns. So these are people who are controlling, and they might be controlling, like trying to help, trying to control the emotions of other people, try to control other people's experiences, offer advice when people haven't asked for it, like just thinking that other people's lives and choices and feelings are your responsibility. Where even to this day, like I have to remind myself, like they have to walk their own path, find their own consequences, and figure that them out. Like I can't save them. It's just like I can save everyone, I can fix everyone. Um, and that's the one I work with the most. And then the last one is avoidance patterns. So this is people who are like super avoidant, reject others, use passive aggressive behavior, are afraid to feel vulnerable, pull people close and push them away, things like that. They won't show like appreciation. So those are the different types of codependency. The one I feel most comfortable working with clients on is the low self-esteem ones and the control ones. And I think those manifest the most in women, where maybe the avoidance would manifest more in the men. Avoidance and denial.
Yeah. I'm thinking about relationships and even myself. Um, yeah, I'm thinking about the individual who struggles with relationships and kind of trying to, yeah, control. So did you say that that was your main struggle also? Sorry, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I received help, I definitely, and it's something that still comes up to this day. Like mental health problems don't just go away. We just learn how to manage and cope with them. But I grew up as a really sensitive, perceptive person, and I could really feel other people's emotions around me whether I was watching a movie or whether I was in a group situation. And I thought that person is upset. It's my job to fix it. That person is anxious. It's my job to calm them. Right. When really like I don't have any kids, like nobody is my responsibility. And I often have to tell myself that people are capable of taking care of themselves. They like one day when I have kids, like I am responsible for taking care of my kids and helping them manage their emotions. And I can offer a hand in like helping someone, but it's not my job to control others' emotions.
Yeah, that's that's really interesting. I think about even parenting for sure, like you mentioned. And but I'm curious, could you elaborate that what you said? Mental health problems don't go away. We just learn to deal with them. Can you?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
some
curious.
mental health problems do go away, but think about it like let's say you had like a broken bone, right? And so your bone has healed and you're better, but you might have to do a little bit more weightlifting or stretching every once in a while to kind of maintain that. Like our when we think of neuroplasticity, right? Let's say I have a pathway of every time I mess up, I think, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid, right? So every single time in my life I've messed up and I thought, oh, I'm so stupid, my neural pathway from that to that has become stronger and stronger and stronger. And then all of a sudden I decided, you know what? I refuse to speak about myself that way. So then I changed and intentionally, instead of saying I'm so stupid, I would go, oops, I made a mistake, right? Every time you say, oops, I made a mistake, now you're building a new pathway, and this pathway is stronger. So slowly the other pathways become weaker, but they're still there. And sometimes we can sort of fall back in that pathway. So just putting as much effort into strengthening our new neural pathways so that the other ones can sort of atrophy. Um, sometimes, sometimes it comes up and we have to be intentional, like people with eating disorders and stuff like that. Like people really can recover, but it's not that you're never going to have a thought like that about food again. And one thing I deal with clients, I'm like, I'm not saying I'm going to fix your depression or anxiety because that's you and that's life and some people have that for life and other people overcome it, but I can help the way you relate to yourself. So some people feel anxious and some people feel, oh my God, I'm such a failure for feeling anxious. Maybe I can't change the fact that you feel anxious in the first place, but I can help you relate to that anxiety better, to understand that anxiety is part of the human experience and that your body is trying to signal to you that something is important and of value to you, something you need to pay attention to, something you care about. So we can change the way we relate to the things that are coming up to us, but some things do stick with us, right? Some things are generational. Some things take a lot of work to break, but some things, do stick with us for life. But we can change our relationship with it.
Yeah, I'll be curious because I think this will be a good good segue or a good conversation. So I have this I want to say thought or mode of operating, which is uh, transmutation or transformation. Um, when I think about, for example, my struggles, my conflicts, most of the time, and this is where, the shadow work comes in. When when I did the shadow work, I looked internally within me and found that we could call it problem. I The deeper I looked into it and the more I really sat in that space, I learned a lot about myself and also maybe even the way like my parents approach problems and generationally kind of like things that have been instilled through the ages or also even societally to lead to this point where I'm looking at myself and I have this pattern and this is my default and this is causing issues. Um, so I've seen that and then I see kind of like the light in the sense that, oh, here's an issue of mine and this is the reason why I'm working, I'm acting or behaving the way I do to with the world, but there's actually a gift there. There's actually something there to be honored and to also to raise. And I could put it in the sense of like and with relationships, I think there's the anxious, there's the um anxious, there's the what's the
We
second
have
one?
avoidant.
Avoidant, and then there's secure. There's those three ones, right? I
Yeah, there's actually a lot more, but those are the three main ones.
right. Well, can you go into that really quick? What other ones are there?
So I'm not an attachment expert. That would fall more under the therapy, but there's disorganized attachment, there's anxious avoidant attachment, like there's like subsets of different attachment styles.
Okay. Yeah, so I was I was looking at anxious avoidant. Yeah, so there was like a mix of those, but I was looking at each one and so I saw each one sort of like the polar opposite of the other, or maybe one being kind of like a fragmented expression of the other. And something that I felt like really like came up was this idea that okay, the anxious person is the one who is constantly wanting that external validation. And then the avoidant person is the one that still has that, and so there's fears, right? There's a reason why they behave this way. Like the avoidant is the result of a fear, and so the way that we interact with that fear really leads to this expression of this attachment style. And what I found was the times that I was anxious versus the times that I was avoidant. Um, I saw that really they were kind of opposites of each other, but also one
They're
had
two sides of the same coin.
yeah, two sides of the same coin. There we go. And so then I really felt like okay, so actually there's a gift that the avoidant personality or avoidant attachment style can give me, and there's a gift that the anxious attachment style can give me. And if I can learn to kind of, remove the fear and look at what both sides are teaching me, then I can then become secure. And so that's kind of how this process of transmutation has come about for me, and it's been a very important process for me and also the people that I work with. Because this way, I feel like that actually leads to true transformation. And if anything, I feel like I operate under this idea um, that you can actually that your weaknesses can then become strengths and and almost like the shadow can then become your light and so that's really my theory, so I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Oh my gosh, I connect to that so much. The way I like to think about it, every negative trait we have, like you said, can also be a positive trait, is there to protect us, right? So we develop our attachment style with our primary caregiver from infancy, right? So we develop an attachment style as a way of self-protection. Same way we develop addictions, same way we develop self-esteem patterns. Everything is a coping skill. Everything our brain does is to protect us. And when
Mhm.
we deconstruct, okay, well, when was the first time that I felt that maybe someone was getting too close to me and I wanted to push them away? Maybe in that scenario, the smart thing to do was to push this person away because they were not safe, right? But now I'm an adult and this person is safe. So I'm mirroring this pattern. So you have to kind of go back and say, you know what? This avoidance was to protect me and it did protect me. And I'm a little spiritual and I'll go, thank you. Thank you for protecting me. I don't need you anymore. I'm ready to move on. Right? Same thing with anxiety. Anxiety is trying to protect us, right? Something's going to go wrong. And if I could just think about what's going to go wrong and rehearse something, then I can protect you. And you're like, okay, maybe rehearsing problems used to help me. Like I got it from here. And like, thank you for trying to protect me. But you don't have to do that anymore. And same goes for depression. So I think what attachment styles are the same. They serve to protect us, and at one point they did. But as we're an adult navigating relationships, especially romantic relationships, relationships deserve to have secure attachment with each other. Um, so slowly, both the anxious partner and the avoidant partner, because that's typically who's drawn to each other, because they feed off of each other, um, need to sort of acknowledge where those patterns come from and that they no longer serve them.
Yeah, I think another interesting point, or very important point, is actually I realized like even through my relationships that you can't use each other. I mean, like you can, but you really the best way to function is to not use your other partner as a way to heal. I feel like
Exactly.
yeah, I feel
That's
like that
enmeshment and that's codependency, and that's not healthy.
yeah, and I feel like most of the culture though kind of really portrays that like in the movies or like the savior. I think now it's obviously we things are more different, but even like myself, I think about or even conversations that over here it's it's like the next person is gonna be like when I feel happy and even like after breakups for example like the you have to take your time to process and grieve and really think about what happened, what went wrong, um, and really fix your mind on something that is the next step, the next level that truly reflects your internal growth. Um,
Mhm.
versus what I commonly see, which is constantly uh, I really point to, hey, you guys, like, let's talk about reflection, self-reflection, look within, like, what happened? Why did this not work out? Instead of continuing to use another relationship as your, um, like, mechanism for healing. I think, I think that needs to be almost, and for sure, there needs to be a much bigger discussion on that. I feel like,
Some people are so afraid to look within because they're afraid of what they might find. They're afraid that they will crumble in the shame, right? So they avoid their own emotions. Subsequently, they'll avoid your emotions, right? The people in their life. Um, I think reflection is super important, and people who have maybe had a tougher past than others might find it more challenging to reflect. So it's really important for them to have like a safe space and almost to have that modeled to them, right? Like sometimes if I notice someone is having a tough time, like I'll disclose something about myself. And then they'll be like, oh, yeah, like sometimes I feel that way too. I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere. Some people, reflection is literally the scariest thing that you could ever ask them to do.
yeah, I think it's crazy for me to, I mean, through me working with others and talking about these concepts, it's kind of crazy for me to realize that this is actually a skill. And I don't think you're not going to be told self-reflection is a skill in school. It's just like That definitely not even anywhere near the, at least when I was growing up, like the periphery of the teachers to talk about internal work or self-reflection, contemplation. I think that was always pushed into the image of a philosopher or this very recluse individual.
Hmm.
When in reality, I mean, I think that even the seasons, even like nature itself, there are times for recession and then also expression. There's highs and there's lows, and there's inwards and there's outwards. There's thinking and then there's expressing. And I think it's very inherent in nature, and it's very inherent in the human nature also. So I think that's really why I got interested in psychology myself, because I was like, whoa, this is this whole world that that I can open up just by looking within.
Hmm.
Yeah, anything you want to share on that?
No, yeah, absolutely. I love that you talked about like even an animal in the wild might reflect, not in the same way, but they might be like, hey, like that was kind of dangerous. Like, where should I go next time so that this doesn't happen again? Right? Like even like in a literal sense, like what path can I take to get my food or my water? Um, yeah, you're absolutely right.
And then the concept of self-reflection being a skill, I think psychology is really bringing that into the mix, especially with the emphasis being put on therapy, also just safe spaces in general. Um, I believe that now what that's kind of coming into the light, but I still feel like self-reflection as a skill probably can be more talked about.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of cultural um, stigma. I think there's a lot of societal stigma. I think generational stigma. Um, there's a lot of things and barriers. And one of the reasons people like coming to me as a coach versus a therapist is some people are not ready for therapy. Even the word therapy scares them. And so they're like, they feel more comfortable with me, like, oh, like a coach, right? Like we're just gonna like set goals and stuff. And it's like, well, no, I'm gonna make you look deep, but we probably won't go as deep as you would with a therapist.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting for you to highlight the difference between therapy and coaching.
So I don't speak for everyone. I speak for myself. A little bit about my background is after I finished my treatment, which was a behavioral health outpatient program. When I finished that, they asked me to come work for them. So I worked for 2 years in a rehab, essentially, doing all sorts of things, teaching um, classes, facilitating dialectical behavioral therapy groups, doing peer support, teaching support groups, and I even created a dance group because, and I know you're gonna love this, like I believe in like movement as being super healing. And so I was working alongside therapists, nurses, psychiatrists, occupational therapists, recovery coaches. I was working alongside all of these people, and I learned a thing or two. And um, I learned what's something that I can handle and what is beyond my scale of expertise, right? And I think it's we need to be careful because the life coach industry is not super regulated and really anyone can say, "Hey, I'm a life coach." So it's okay to ask your life coach, you know, what sort of background do you have? Are you trauma informed? How do you approach people who are survivors of trauma? Stuff like that. But for me, like I'm not really going to go into too much into your past. It's important for me to sort of have a general idea of what's happened in your life, but we're more going to pay attention to what's going on now. How are things that happened in the past impacting your life now? And what are ways we can strategize to work with your limitations now to achieve the things you want to achieve in this life? A therapist might say, well, let's go back to the event. What happened? How can we reframe it? How can we understand what happened better? How can we process or desensitize you to what happened? So I'm more here and like what's happening now and the things that are coming up for you. Let's acknowledge them and figure out tools to work with them. Whereas a therapist might try to deconstruct them from the beginning.
Yeah, I think um now that you're speaking, I feel like, well, I love psychology. So I studied psychology, I got my bachelor's in it, and I decided to do YouTube really just because I got super deep into meditation and spirituality, and that kind of for me, like I think maybe now things are changing, but I felt like it wasn't mixing too well in. Like I had a lot of, I guess you could say, um things that, oh, like for example, like Carl Jung psychoanalysis. Really, I love psychoanalysis, but with the scientific rigor that we have now, it's very hard to be able to put that into. I mean, there's still analysts and there's still psychologists that do practice it, but it's a lot it's a lot more centered on I definitely like cognitive, definitely behavioral. I see obviously the mentions of self-esteem and those things, practices, reframing, things like that. But I also think, and now that you were speaking, I feel like there's almost like a, and this is from my studies also into um to just the psychological like the field, which is like it's almost like psychology is trying to do a lot, and it's still because it's still pretty young. It's like 100 years, over 100 years in terms of development. Um, I feel like a lot of these things should be taught in school, and like behavioral, like these are things that are very like for like infants, toddlers, and I'm not saying this to be demeaning because when I was looking doing my work, I realized I was like, oh, like this goes way back to then. Like I needed this then. Um,
Absolutely.
so I feel like there are also going to be these issues where you're going to have a lot of adults, um, and this is something it's from it's a work from I got this from Ken Wilber's work. He studies a lot of different psychological um theories and practices, and he talks about there being like different domains that we all have. So maybe our ability to relate, our social, I guess we could call it intelligence, um, can be in like at one level, while our cognitive intelligence can be really high. And so like even though you have these mature adults, with faculties able to, with the faculties to operate, at a regular day-to-day level, achieve, manage these like um kind of high performing tasks, just working on having a career, right? Paying bills, etc. They might be able to do those things, but still, these other areas might be very dormant, very undeveloped, and so I feel like psychology is almost like trying. It's definitely trying to help the individual, but there's so
Mhm.
many individuals with different necessities, different
Yeah.
requirements, and for me, like listening to you speak is kind of opening my mind a lot more because I mean I had the psychology field kind of like very narrow-mindedness. I have my judgments of it. Like it could do better. There's like a lot of things that we're not even talking about. But now that I hear your story, I'm kind of reframing and I'm like, holy shit, there's just too much to really like. You can't put this all on one field. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I
And
don't
I
know.
mean, there's so many schools of thought too, just with like even within the mental health field. I loved what you talked about like we need to be like teaching this like younger. There is an amazing organization locally here in Arizona that I used to work for called Mindfulness First. And what they do is they teach mindfulness and like self-regulation to children. And what you'll notice is adults who struggle to regulate their emotions, and there's a lot of them,
Hmm.
didn't learn as children. A lot of therapy, self-help, coaching, whatever you want to call self-development, is learning things as an adult that somehow we missed as children. Something simple as I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm going to take a few breaths before I react is huge, huge. And the fact that this organization is teaching these children from a very young age, and you know what the children are doing? They're going home and they're teaching their parents. They see their parents get frustrated, and they said, "Mom, should we take a belly breath together? Or should we take some box breath together?" And it's amazing, like, their strength. I even saw a video yesterday online. It was kind of sad, but this girl saved her mom's life because she knew to call 911. And so she was being interviewed by the news. And they said, "What happened?" And she said, "Oh, well, I saw she was passed out. So I took a few deep breaths and I told myself I was okay. And then I called 911." Would she have been able to call 911 if she didn't have the skill to take a few deep breaths and tell herself it was okay? Probably not. Um, and I personally did not learn to self-soothe as a child. I had an older brother who used to tease me a lot. You know, he was rough like a boy, and I was a sensitive little girl, and he would mess with me, and he thought we were playing, but I was scared. And I would go to my mom and I'd be like, "Mom, like, help me, like, da, da, da." And she'd be like, "Stop whining. Like, I'll listen to you when you tell me, like, Mom, can you please, tell my brother, like, to stop hitting me or bothering me?" And because no one ever taught me how to stop whining, to relax, to ask for what I needed. My whining was a cry for help. And they said, "Well, I'm not going to listen to you if you're whining." And I thought, well, I don't know how to get out of this. I'm freaking out, right? Like my emotions are high, I'm dysregulated. So something like for as a child, and they would say, just breathe, take a deep breath. I'm like, you take a deep breath. What does breathing have to do with the fact that my brother is bothering me? And and when you don't understand the purpose of something, it doesn't really help as much. And the more I learned about like nervous system, and when we take a deep breath, we're actually signaling to our body that we are calm. Therefore, we become calm. And there's a reason why we take deep breaths. And it wasn't just a way for people to tell me to chill out or calm down, when I was activated, that people were trying to help me by teaching me that breathing was going to help me calm down. I thought it was like, just breathe. I didn't understand. So I think I love that we are educating kids on how to, take deep breaths and why taking deep breaths hurts and when is it important to take a deep breath, right? Like maybe right after something bad happens or right before you're about to say something hurtful. Um, I think you're like spot on that we need to be teaching this to children. And I think some people have caught on and a movement is starting because we will have much better, well-adjusted adults if we learn these skills as children. I believe we will have emptier prisons. I believe we will have lower crime. We'll have less abuse. We'll have less suicide if we learn self-regulation as children.
Yeah, I mean, I think about even the difference between how many breaths could have saved lives, right? Like an individual who gets
Mm,
riled up in the streets, maybe grows up in the streets around gang violence, and they're taught that that's how you react to anger. Now you
yeah,
put that individual in a place where they learn to self-regulate, and they're taught how to react to anger in a much more conducive manner. Then how many triggers stop getting pulled, right?
it's
Like
so
how many?
true.
And I think that's. And I think about even even my approach. I feel like it's almost like I'm understanding kind of where I stand in like my efforts. Because I'm about the spiritual, I'm all about transformation, really the soul. And yet there's so many individuals that have even no ability to conceive of that because they're still thinking about, well, they still need to regulate themselves. They still have to be able to connect with people socially, like confidence, self-esteem. Like these things are tools that eventually can lead to that, but not everybody's gonna. Not everybody is either ready for that or needs that, and it's like I don't know. I think for me, it's a very very big reframing of of uh, of my mind for sure.
I think so too.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, you touched on well. First off, I just want to say I'm pretty grateful because I'm like I didn't know where this was gonna go, and I'm super excited, like super happy. Like I'm getting a lot out of this. Just want to say that.
I'm so glad. I'm so grateful to have the platform to share. I'm so passionate about mental health. A lot of people are struggling, like a lot. We have no idea how many people are really truly struggling with mental health. And the more we can talk about it and make people feel less alone, it really does take the load off of it. And um, I'm just like I'm never gonna stop like talking about mental health and being a voice of support for people who need it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to. I'm thinking about let's take it home with dance. I think that we're gonna be able to connect this.
So,
This is gonna be dope. I think this is gonna be good. So like, I see dance as a vehicle for people to learn to connect with other individuals. I'm really big into for sure self-expression, vulnerability, connection, authenticity, confidence, um, tapping into your masculine and your feminine energies, um, rhythm syncing up around you. So those are big concepts that I very much attribute to dance. And at first it wasn't like that, but through the time and as I developed as a dancer and as I got to meet more people and as I also grew as an individual, I saw those things pop up. So I think the first question would be, do you like I see dance as an arena for people to develop a lot of social skills. Um, and how do you see dance as like how do you see dance as a vessel? Like what do you see
oof.
dance as a vessel for? What's the opportunity there?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think dancing, any form of dancing is one of the most positive things you can do for yourself. It's actually how I used to regulate myself as a child. I would lock myself in my room and like dance to Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. And to this day, when I'm struggling to regulate, I will dance in my room to Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera.
There you
So
go.
dancing helps with so much. I mean, we have the obvious, like the physical, right? Like getting your body moving uh, has amazing psychological effects. And we're learning more so as new discoveries about like muscles secreting hormones and all this stuff is coming out. We're learning more than ever how good physical activity is for the brain. Then, when we talk about like a flow state, right? That's one of the best things you can do for your mental health and nervous system to just be in the zone, right? Like between now and the end of this song, like I am fully in the zone. I can't think about anything other than what am I going to do next? Like listening to the music, like just giving your brain that, even the 3 minute song, giving your brain a break for those 3 minutes is amazing. Then obviously, music can be healing, it can be spiritual, it can you know, hold memories, right? Like maybe you're in the car and that song that you had a good dance to comes up, and all of a sudden you feel the same joy you felt while you were dancing. Um, I think when it comes to building community, right? If you show up, even if you're the worst dancer ever, even if you're in a wheelchair, like even if you can't dance, if you show up to a salsa social or a West Coast swing social or whatever you do, if you show up once a week, it's pretty impossible for people to not start noticing you and just accepting you as part of that space. And it just takes one connection to change a life and to also build a community. Uh, I think also so much like emotions, trauma, fear, everything happens in our body. Like that's one thing that, therapy gets really into. Like, where do you feel this in your body? Right? We think that everything is happening in our mind, but it's happening in our body. So how are we going to heal this? By thinking about it, by talking about it, or by moving through it? You know, I believe that dancing can really help heal trauma. I think it can help build people's confidence. I met, my boyfriend through dance, and it is the most like beautiful, healthy relationship I've ever had. And being able to share our passion for dance together is really incredible. So I highly recommend dance. Like when someone moves to a new city, I say just go take a dance class, go find someone to dance. Dance in your room, dance at the mirror, dance in the shower, dance at the club, anywhere you can dance. I think is one of the best things you can do for your mind and for your body. And science supports that as well.
Yeah, a few things for sure. Especially the flow state. I love going into the flow state. Some things that I will add is that I think there are some science, uh, not science, there's some scientific studies done on the flow state, and it showed that people who experience more moments of the flow state are generally overall happier, more satisfied with their life. They attribute it to having a sense of purpose, and also you mentioned community. I think that was one of the biggest things that really pushed, which is the ability to be anywhere and connect with strangers, and I see dance as a very intimate thing. It's like something where you're sharing your body with somebody else. Like you're like in contact, especially with partner dance. You're in contact with another individual, and so you're also moving, and with dance itself being a very vulnerable thing, doing it outside with a stranger, like how much progress does that show? I think I feel like that's really huge. And obviously, I mean, you couldn't be able to do that if it wasn't established as a safe space, right? And so that's kind of something that I hope to be able to work on more in the future, helping the community grow and solidify itself as a safe space. But I mean, for sure, like having that capacity there is very helpful. And then I think you mentioned trauma, healing yourself. I think I had this conversation with a friend of mine. He dances a lot, and he had mentioned to me that he used to have a lot of back pain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that just from I don't know, just for a while he had it, and he got into dancing, and just through the years, he said he noticed that there was a shift, that he no longer experienced that pain, and he was talking to a psychologist about it, and they said that it was most likely due to the amount of dancing and the movement that he was doing. It's just like most likely had some releasing effect. And then I also think about it in terms of catharsis, which is whenever you do a work that within itself has this feeling of releasing, almost of dumping out, of clearing out.
Yeah.
So this very, very kind of like a psychoanalytic um, perspective, which is you and this is also even maybe attributed to rituals, for example. Maybe like the for we can I mean the one that comes to mind is like ayahuasca. Obviously, like you go for and you become transformed, you have this new transformative experience. But other rituals, just like um engaging in that and entering this space so that you can release and be transformed, that within itself, I saw that really very explicitly in social dancing. I felt like it was a great place for me to also to go to during my breakup. Like that was a great like it was a great place for me to really feel into my emotions and really be able to express that and express myself very freely, and and also still be received, and then the individual doesn't even have to know what I'm going through, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to know what the other individual is going through, but it's just this space for us to meet and express ourselves. I think that's yeah, I wanted to
I
add
would
to that.
also I would also add that like the themes that we experience while on the dance floor echo the themes that we're dealing with in real life. And when we can work through them on the dance floor, it will echo out into our life. Like for example, like I struggle with shines, with like salsa shines.
Hmm.
Um, I feel great when I'm following. I feel super confident. And then someone leaves me on my own and I freak out, right? What do I do? Oh my gosh, does this look weird? Was that normal? Am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? I'm so tired. When is this going to be over? Right? In my real life, I feel very comfortable around others and in community. but you can draw sort of a parallel that maybe individually, I didn't feel like I could stand as tall without other people's input and stuff. So as I work on my confidence in my solo dancing, my confidence in my self outside will grow as well.
I love it. Yeah, that's literally what I like. I would say I preach like your, and this is what I think that goes into the my where I go into like the masculine and feminine energies, where um like when you engage in dance, that within itself, I feel like it's a very feminine it's a feminine act. You're receiving and you're surrendering, and you're becoming one with the song, and so you're channeling that forward. I think that within itself is a feminine act. But for example, like the way I lead is different than the way other guys lead, and that within itself is was very reflective. I saw that with the way that I approached romantic relationships. Like my lead is very soft, and I try not to control. I let the follow kind of do her thing. I give a lot of space. And at first it manifested itself as shyness, right? Like, but
Mm.
as time evolved and as I learned, I was like, oh wait, there's actually a reason why I do this. It's because I want to give them the space. I want to, yeah, and as long as I'm secure in myself and I'm able to, show off my own shines, for example, like give shine in my own way. Um, and if I can do that, then it's that equal exchange, and so now shyness becomes confidence,
Yeah.
and both in the dance floor, and also in life.
As someone who loves dancing with you, I can like totally attest that that is like totally the way I'm also experiencing it as a follow. Like when I dance with you, like I can't just like come in and like whatever. I have to like center because you're subtle and direct, and I have to really ground myself first so that I can pick up on every little nuance because you're not going to force me. Everything is an invitation, and I want to be invited, right? So I sort of ground, and then after a dance, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did all that. Like he was so subtle, and I still got it, and that's like, then I walk away feeling confident, like, ooh, like I can pick up even on like subtle cues, and like I'm always feeling like on a high after dancing with you because that energy does feel like really safe and intentional for me.
Wow, thank you. I'm so glad you share that. Um, yeah, I mean, like I'm getting like goosebumps right now just because I feel like
Oh,
even this moment right now is very important for dancers because I feel like dancers really don't share how they feel when they're dancing with the individual. So yeah, I have this like have I want more moments like these. I want to help people have more moments like these. But like going into that, like, well, first off, thank you so much. Um, I really do. That's kind of like my philosophy, which is like, and I never intentionally made it this thing where it's like, oh, I'm very subtle or indirect, etc., etc. But as I step into who I am, and it's very interesting because then you can like, you know, the way I dance automatically, subconsciously, was in some way an expression of the way I move in my life. Also subconsciously. So
exactly.
yeah, and so I think like um my theory is that if if I can be centered and if I can be calm but also there's strength in that too. Like very strong feeling of self-assertiveness, but also um very flexible. That's the word, yeah. So
Hmm.
my theory is that an individual who can learn to do that can also invite others in, and there's almost like this harmonizing effect that allows for others to really chill out. Like at first it's like the first thing is always presence. The first thing is always the breath, I guess, because I like to take deep breaths sometimes, or I stop moving if we're like there's too much noise. I just like stop and I sit there with my follow, um, and And so mm, like I'm connecting this to kind of to like this conversation itself. Like my whole philosophy is to help individuals learn to step into their power through being present, and then also understand that it's not about forcing it. It's about receiving and allowing yourself to kind of flow with it. So there's a lot of surrender. So that's kind of like the very feminine side to it. And then the masculine serves as the centering force that grounds it.
Right.
Feminine rolls around it and is and very very much like dresses it, you know? Like that's
Yeah.
yeah.
And I would also say that like the masculinity is like leading, right? Like I'm setting the tone. I'm setting the tone for the energy, for the pace, for like the vibe of this dance. And like you are in that masculine energy is like, I'm gonna create a container, which I think is one of my favorite parts about like masculine feminine energy is a masculine energy creating a container for a feminine energy to then come into her power.
Yeah. I'm kind of I think now that we're here, I feel like we could probably link this to the masculine and the feminine. I have an idea kind of like there's like the lower masculine and then there's the higher masculine. And like obviously like on the lower end it's the more so undeveloped masculine. On the higher
Yeah.
end is the higher expression, and it's likewise with the feminine. We could probably tie this into also like you mentioned earlier how you work more with men and also but also talking about the issues with women. I think fitting dance into that picture and using dance kind of as an example, a little microcosm, where what is the ideal? Um, what is the ideal interaction? What is the ideal relationship? Uh, what is yeah? I think you kind of touched on it, but maybe kind of relating it also back to kind of where we started.
Hmm. What is the ideal? Can you say the question one more time?
Yeah, I said a lot, so I'm gonna try to refine that. So kind of like using dance as a microcosm, like what makes the ideal dance, and then tie that over to what makes the ideal
Okay.
relationship, kind of, right?
Okay. So the themes, right? I
Yeah.
would say um, safety. I would say self-trust, right? I trust that you're not going to push me into that person. Or I trust when you spin, you're not going to break my finger, right? There's like you're trusting your body with that other person.
Hmm.
There's self-expression, right? Like our personality. No two people dance exactly the same. There's boundaries. There's boundaries in dance, right? Don't put your hand here. Don't do this. Don't do that. Definitely boundaries, limits.
Hmm.
There's autonomy, right? I don't want to dance with you. I don't want to dance this song anymore. I don't dance bachata. I only dance salsa or whatever, right? Like we get to decide what works for us. And there's play, right?
Hmm.
Fun. Um, there's there's love. There's lust. There's everything.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'll add some. Let's see. Creativity. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of there with fun, but I think creativity for sure. I think that a great relationship is very creative too. You know, the partner inspires the other to want to explore more, I feel like.
Mhm.
Next, and it's the same way with dance, right?
Sure.
For sure, presence. I think that's a big one. Um, being there and being completely there,
Mhm.
not being distracted, and also like I think that also is very much goes in line with just a relationship. Can you be present enough to listen to this individual
Mhm.
and go there with them, like really
Give
go
and
there?
take. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
I would also add like sensuality and even sexuality.
yeah.
Um, as you know, it plays a part in the way we move our body, the way we feel about our body. Um, the types of dance we choose, everything.
Mhm. I would say, yeah, I would agree. I would say that like yeah, even the way I dance, obviously like I don't I'm not too familiar with central dancing, for example, central bachata. Um, but there's a I think that is also very reflective of myself. It's kind of like I'm a more of a conservative person, I feel like.
Exactly.
And in my head, I'm just like, but I want to like I know that that's a law, and I want to kind of be able to at least understand, and also when my partner wants to feel that sensuality, also like me being able to give them that space,
Hmm.
that ability to do so, to express themselves in that way. So I think I- and there's another thought that will I think there's this thought that I had on oh yes, it's also sensuality, like you mentioned, is innate to it. Also, sexuality, right? It's like the root chakra, the sacral. I feel like those two are very much connected with dance itself because it's the body, it's grounding, it's and
Hmm.
what lies within those two areas. Well, those are where we get our instincts for survival, for food, for sex, for um uh just that very raw primal energy. And so
Hmm.
when we're dancing, I feel like, and I think this is also very, I think very important for individuals who also struggle with their sexuality. I think tuning into dance itself could be very just freeing, can be very opening. It's very, I think when people talk about like balancing the chakras, I think that dance within itself has a very balancing effect on those two topics specifically.
Hmm. I agree, 100%.
Awesome. Do you want to add anything to that? I feel like there's
Okay, the only other
Right.
one I have that came to mind is like nonverbal communication.
Okay.
Because that plays a part in our dancing and also like echoes in our real life relationships.
I'm curious, do you think that let's see. I feel like I've had moments, well, it's not I feel, but it's like I've had moments where there's a very it's almost like reteaching myself to communicate, knowing that the positioning of my body, um the way that I'm breathing, even like everything is being communicated, but it is being done so at a very subconscious level. And I believe uh that when you get to a specific level of presence, it doesn't necessarily have to be skill, but presence. There is a capacity to really tune into those subtleties and almost communicate subconsciously. Um, and and that's kind of like where now you begin to create so much because there's that link that you're not restricted to just physical. You have that
Hmm.
mental link. I feel like I think I want to say it's telepathic. That's really where I'm gonna go with that. But
Yeah,
um, yeah. What do you think about that?
totally. I mean, it's like it's even like spiritual. It's like soul related, right? And I would also say that it's probably happening when you're dancing at a subconscious level because it's also echoing in your day-to-day life. And it's seeping into your dance. The
Yeah,
same way dance can teach us themes for life, life can teach us themes for dance.
yeah. I think yeah, it's very. I think about it. Yeah, it's very. There's a lot to like think about, and I think this is just more theorizing and uh like me getting feedback from you like um if we can release emotions and if that is a sacred space, then it's almost like when we dance we are channeling our experiences, our memories, our emotions, everything, and we are almost giving that to the other individual, and not even it's not even just our bodies that we're expressing, it's our whole life, our whole
Our
experience.
spirit.
Yeah, 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 like I think that's really, yeah, it's beautiful. I can't really elaborate on that more. It's like
Yeah.
it's so it's there and it's just
And for people listening, like you do not have to be like an expert social dancer to get the benefits of dance. Like even just dancing in your room, having a dance party with friends, even just tapping your foot to the beat, like everything has its benefits. There's no like, you have to dance like a professional to get the benefits of dance.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to those and that's why I named those concepts or those yeah, those concepts, those topics. It just goes back to those, presence. You mentioned like safety, boundaries, all of these things that we mentioned. I think we've been talking about them since the start. It comes down to those things, and if you can, if you understand those, then you will understand how to dance, right?
And then, some people refer to life as a dance,
Very
you
common.
know, which I think is very accurate.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything you want to add before? I feel like that was a really, really great segment.
No, I'm happy. I could talk about this stuff for hours. I mean, but I think this would be a good stopping point.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, let's see. I think anything anything that you'd say like a call to action or like or maybe how can people find you? Where can people find you? Let's go with that.
People can find me at Coaching with Aleeza on Instagram. That's Aleeza. I also have a website that's in my Instagram bio. And if you want to follow just for mental health tips, or if you're looking for some one-on-one support, or even if you are looking for support, aren't sure if coaching what is what you need, and just want to be connected to the mental health community, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Elisa. This was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really happy with it, and um I feel like this is really what I like. We hardly really talked. Like we hardly really talked. Like I know Eladio. He's super cool.
Yeah.
And he's super cool. He's a cool dude. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm just pretty happy to have had you on and connect in this way. I think this kind of like really sets the tone, you know, for
Thank you.
interactions and stuff. So I'm really happy about that, and
I'm really
I'm
happy
happy you're
too.
on. Yeah, thank you.
I'm really grateful to be given the platform.
I'm happy to have you on. So thank you.
Thank you.